more on the Suncoast ties to 9/11 is ABC 7's own Linda Carson. Linda, what was the first moment you realized that something was going on?
I did not realize anything until Ann Compton called out and said, "Mr. President, do you know a second plane hit the World Trade Center?" I had watched his face when Andrew Card whispered to him. I just thought he was serious and then got up, thanked the kid, and left. At that point, I realized something was going on, but we had had a little plane fly into a big building in Tampa. So I thought, uh-oh, we've had two people fly into the World Trade Center. I had no idea until we got into the media center that it was anything like it turned out to be.
Because you had to be there very early, and you're in a lockdown situation.
Yes.
So
we were there at 5 a.m., and we got into the room, and we stayed there, so we couldn't move. Our live truck operator was alone in the live truck. He knew everything, but he had no way to talk to us.
Because there were no cell phones those
No,
days.
there were not. We couldn't have any way to communicate. So it was like we were cut off from the world. And the people in the media center, you could see in there, they're really excited about seeing the president. They start to applaud, and then they see his face, and they realize from the look on his face, there is something wrong.
Right. Now, when people look back at the video of President Bush in the classroom, if you look at it, you could see that there was something on his mind the entire time. Mm-hmm. And then after Andrew Card, the chief of staff, whispers in his ears, you could see,
he was very still and very serious. And we had been told that we would go through the media center, and there were people lined up in the atrium to shake his hands. And he was going that way too. But he went this way into a little room. We ran around, and we were walking down that path, and people would stick out their hand. Then they saw, "Where's the president? Where's the president?" But there was not more than like 5 or 6 minutes between the time we left that room and we got into the media center. And I don't know how he planned what he said. I'd always thought presidents had somebody feed them every word. But I was just amazed at the way he handled it, what he said, and it made me not be afraid, but be very, very proud to be American and be very, very close to all of the people that were there that day.
So even when President Bush came into the auditorium and, and spoke on national television and to the crowd there, did you know to the extent of what was happening?
At that, as he came in, they turned on the monitor. So for the first time, we could see the monitor. We couldn't hear it, but we could see the buildings. But at first, you don't know what those buildings are. I just heard World Trade Center. So you see the monitor, and you could see when he came in, the people were clapping, then they stopped, and there was dead silence. And this was just in a few seconds' time. So nobody in that room, or hardly anybody in that room, knew anything was going on until he told us.
When the president was speaking, I mean, what were your thoughts? What were you thinking? I mean, obviously the gravity of it, yet on one hand, that president was right here. You could see the TV monitors. What were you thinking?
And our country was under attack. I was thinking this couldn't happen to America. Nobody would dare attack us. But it made me feel very strong because I never had any doubt that the country was going to be okay, because it felt very, very strong and very safe at that moment. But it was the thought of what was going on there at that moment in time. And you just thought, nothing's ever going to be the same again.
And the president finished his remarks and then immediately left?
He immediately left. His motorcade, of course, was ready in front of the building. We had had camera crews all over, from the Colony to St. Armand's to Booker. We had a crew at the airport. They were waiting for him to leave, hoping maybe to get a word with him. He was in that plane before you could count to 10. So they were really moving fast when they started. And of course, they left the national media here. So hundreds of people were left here. No planes were allowed to fly. Everybody was rushing for cars to get out of town, but they were stuck here for a while.
Okay, Linda, thank you so much. We'll be back in just a moment, and we're going to take a look at where I was on that infamous day. Stay with us. Joining us for more on the 15th anniversary of 9/11 is Norma Schimmel, who is helping organize commemorations across the Suncoast this week, and Peter Abbott, who is with the New York City Police Department for more than 20 years and also a former Sarasota police chief. I want to thank you both for being here. And Peter, let me start with you. Where were you the moment that the planes hit? What was your rank? What was your job with the NYPD?
I was an inspector with the New York City Police Department, and I was assigned, I was the executive officer in the office of the first deputy commissioner. So I was on the top floor of headquarters, and our complex was adjacent to the police commissioner's headquarters, usually very stoic, and all of a sudden I heard a big commotion over there about 7:45 in the morning. I ran through the connecting doors, and I could see everybody pressed up against the glass, and from there we could see that the North Tower had been struck, and somebody said a plane ran into it. So coming from New York, we have a lot of disasters, unfortunately. There's a lot of things that would go on. So I just said, look, I'm going to grab the radio. It's easy for me to run across. It's only 4 blocks, go through City Hall Park and Municipal Plaza. And I said, I'll let you know what's going on when I reach the Manhattan South Field Command Post. So within a few minutes, I was down the elevator out the door. And by the time I got to Vesey and Church, the second plane hit. And
Norma, actually, why don't you hold that up? That's the New York City Times from 9/12. You know, an unprecedented time, and that's the New York Post there. But you're saying that you were in the church right across the street.
I was on the street, and when that second plane hit, that explosion was probably the loudest thing I've ever heard. And of course, your head goes straight up. And flames came out of both sides of the building, I guess from the jet fuel, and they actually met at the top temporarily. Of course, we knew at that point it was no accident, and then we got to work.
You know, I asked Linda the same thing when she was watching President Bush as it was happening. Is there a way to appreciate the magnitude of what was happening before your very eyes?
Your heart sinks. When the first plane hit, we were hoping against hope that it was an accident, but it was a clear, cloudless day. When the second plane hit, we knew there was no way it wasn't on purpose, and that's when your heart really sinks and you realize you're under attack.
You know, I was driving into work, and I was listening to WCBS radio, and the traffic reporter was saying a small plane, like a propeller plane, had hit the World Trade Center, and so it took a while for even by the time I got to work to identify that this was a commercial airliner. I can't imagine what you saw that day.
Well, we were trying to get information, because if you're from the New York City area, you know that Manhattan's surrounded by 3 airports: Newark, LaGuardia, and JFK. So there's lots of air traffic. And we also knew very briefly, shortly thereafter, that I actually got on the radio and said to the dispatcher, I said, it's the XO of the First Steps office, I said, you got to call the FAA and get dibs. I actually used that word, not professional, but I said, get dibs on every plane in the sky, find out what's going on. They couldn't get a hold of 2 planes. They had your transponders turned off. They were off course. And one of them went into the Pentagon, one of them went into the field in Shanksville. But that was a very nervous time, waiting to see when the next plane was
Correct me if I'm wrong, was the Emergency Operations Center for the NYPD in the World Trade Center?
The City Emergency Operations Center was on the 22nd floor in one of the towers, and it's actually in 7 World Trade, a building that fell down later that night. It was destroyed, and we ended up going back to police headquarters to run the situation room.
And were you basically with the commissioner, and was the mayor with you?
We were in the intersection at 75 at Vesey and Church, and I was there with the police commissioner. I was there with the mayor, the fire commissioner, Tom Von Essen. I was there with the chief of department, briefly Joe Esposito, the head of the FBI down there, Barry Morn, all the staff that go along with that.
And did you see the towers collapse?
I was in 75 Barclay with the mayor. He was getting on the phone to try to get air support. It sounds crazy, air support for New York City airspace. And we were on the phone with the governor. We were trying to get the subway shut down, the tunnels closed, the air traffic put down. There was a lot of stuff going on.
And Norm, you were a New York City born and raised boy, 40 years, and you were in Arkansas at the time and drove immediately home.
I had a rental car driving to my my company at that time, and listening to Mike in the morning, and they said a small plane hit the building. And when I hit the company, I saw the second plane on TV, turned the car around and drove. I can't even tell you how many hours I drove. I filled the car up. My first sighting was from the Jersey Turnpike, of the smoke and everything coming up before I got in the city. And if you said to me, did you drive 17 hours? I couldn't tell you.
This was traumatic for all of America, really the world. But Do you feel any differently because you are a New Yorker?
Yeah, no, it's new, and I think you can relate to this too. 9/11, 8:46 in the morning is a day to many, many people in New York. But when you say 9/11 to a New Yorker, that's a period. It's not a day at 8:46, it's a period. Some people think it's 2.5 years. If you're involved with any of the people down there, it's a lifetime and more. But you know, you can remember the silence of the city. There's so much.
So what are you doing now to help commemorate the 15th anniversary of this?
Well, we're doing, I'm involved with the ceremony up in Sarasota, which is at the National Cemetery on Sunday night at 6 p.m. from 6 to 7:30. It was organized by the ministerials. And the same day, on Sunday, September 11th, at 10 o'clock in the morning at Patriots Park in Venice, there is also a memorial ceremony, and they do that every year, too. It's a very beautiful memorial ceremony. Sarasota has a 9/11 memorial in front of the police headquarters, and Venice has a 9/11 memorial at Patriots Park.
You know, it's been 15 years, and there are a lot of people, a lot of young people, who weren't even around when this happened. My kids were babies. And do you think that the people who were young or not even born yet have really kind of a sense of appreciation of what this was? Kind of like, you know, I mean, I studied Pearl Harbor, but I was not around to experience it and to experience the impact it had on the country.
That's a great point. I was at a school today in Sebring. One of my coworkers asked me to speak before the school over there because his daughter had gotten a seed from the tree that survived, and they planted another tree, and they're doing a memorial over there. So I went over and I said, I looked out, it was elementary. Nobody had been born then. So it's really trying to put it in context. It's something they really haven't experienced firsthand. So I said, you know, we have a lot of freedoms in this country, and other places don't have those freedoms.
I tell you what, this conversation is so important that we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk some more. So we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back. We are discussing the 15th anniversary of 9/11 with Norma Schimmel, who is helping organize commemorations across the Suncoast this week, and Peter Abbott, who was with the NYPD on 9/11. You know, I'm looking at the New York Times here of the moment that the plane struck. If you remember the TV transmitter on top of the World Trade Center, my dad designed it. He was an engineer for CBS television for many years, and you know, we all have our personal connections. If you're from the New York area with the World Trade Center, I went there on a class trip when I was in 5th grade. You know, I celebrated my parents' 50th anniversary there, and so it's still, after all these years, hard to really put this in perspective. And you know, Peter, let me ask you, I mean, how do you deal with the things that you saw that day? I mean, you saw people die. You had friends who died.
Yes. I always say closure is a word that's overused, and I just don't believe in that. I just think when you see things like this, and they stay with you forever, and then you really take a deeper look at what your life means after that, because you kind of have this survivor's guilt. Folks who walked to the left died, and folks who walked to the right lived, and there was no rhyme or reason to it. And you just want to make sure that the rest of it really counts.
Norm, we live in such a fascinating area here in Sarasota because there are so many retired New Yorkers down here and families who have moved down to the from the Northeast. On top of that, you know, this is where President Bush was the moment it happened. What do you hope to get out of the different commemorations this week?
Well, two quick things. Firstly, just a sentence from my mother the night of it. My mother got a hold of me and she said, Norman, your generation has just suffered their Pearl Harbor somewhat closer to home. And it's a sentence that I've never forgotten, and that's why I continue to help doing this, because I have a fear that December 7th is being forgotten, and then this will be forgotten by future generations. But I think if we continue to remember all the people and the incidents and all that occurred, and of course I remember 9/11 to me is a period, a 2.5-year period. I remember all the things that New Yorkers did, and especially our mayor. that we never forget this, and we never forget the people involved. That's the most important thing. I wish everybody in America would spend 5 minutes at the pools that have everybody's name on it. If you go down to what used to be called Ground Zero, to the World Trade Center, and stand at those pools for 5 minutes, your life will be changed, I promise.
Peter, have you been back?
I have. It's very difficult. They really did a nice job memorializing folks, but when you see the names, on the sides of the pools that are engraved, and you realize you knew them, you were with them that day, and they're not here anymore, it's very hard. It really is.
And that 9/11 memorial is really, I mean, it's such a profound part of our memory now. But Norm, you're also, you and your wife, putting up a plaque at Booker Elementary because, in a very different way, that spot is so meaningful to really our national history.
Yes, it is, and always will be. The whole idea is for people to come in every morning and think about 9/11, just not on 9/11. I want to say one thing about the pools. At 6 o'clock in the morning every morning, a man gets up, and whose ever birthday it is that day, they put a white flower on it, and when you walk to those pools and see those flowers, it's unbelievable.
I was reading today an account in Politico, a moment-by-moment account of President Bush's day, starting at the Colonnade, where he used to live, and all through the events in Sarasota. It was absolutely incredible. Gentlemen, we'll have to leave it here. Norm and Peter, thank you for being here. And when we return, we'll have an interview with former Senator Bob Graham about the Saudi connection to 9/11.